Bari Weiss has made an utter laughingstock of CBS News, and 60 Minutes, by the way, has not been immune from that effect. They've looked fairly compromised as a result of what Weiss has done. Is it possible that the end goal, the metric for success, is not viewers and it's not profit? It's doing the sort of news and not doing the sort of news that the Republicans want. And then there's these people, these empty vessels, these pathetic, corrupt, poor, unfortunate souls that are filling these seats and never once expressing an opinion they actually hold while raking in millions of dollars. CBS News editor-in-chief Bari Weiss, love saying that, she had a big town hall where she was trying to deal with CBS and get them to be okay with some of the changes that she's been put into effect. And effectively, she indicated that she's going to continue leaning into the right-wing propaganda, even as it has utterly failed to bring in new viewers, its supposed stated goal. Here's how she put it. The honest truth is, right now, we are not producing a product that enough people want. And so what is she gonna do about it? Well, what do you know? Hire a bunch of conservatives. What I would label ideological DEI. They're probably gonna put it in a different way, but among the changes that were announced, the network will bring on 18 new commentators akin to US cable news powerhouses CNN, MS Now, and Fox, as well as steep staffing cuts to those who don't align with Weiss's vision for the network, probably politically or in terms of Israel or whatever. The new hires include conservative podcasters Niall Ferguson and Patrick McGee, and others like physician Mark Hyman, who has close ties to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has been controversial for scaling back vaccines, and he has some commentary in that area too. So the idea is hire more right-wingers, bring on more right-wingers. And obviously, CNN hiring a bunch of right-wingers ever since 2016 has made them a ratings juggernaut. Just bringing in more right-wingers obviously always helps solve all of your problems, but that's what she's going to do. Now, what's interesting is that people have been very clear that they don't actually want this out of CBS. So the network had their town hall with Erica Kirk. This was Bari Weiss's idea. We're gonna bring in Erica Kirk, obviously. It saw an 11% decline in viewership compared to typical viewership in the same time slot. So not only was it not a huge hit, it was literally worse than running the reruns that they could have otherwise done. Also, she was the one who oversaw the relaunch of the CBS Evening News, bringing on Tony DeCoppel or whatever, who has been backsliding in the ratings ever since. They've lost like 30% of their viewers since they launched that. People didn't want to see Erica Kirk. They didn't want to see this guy. It's not actually working, and yet she's doubling down on it. And why might that be? Is it possible that the end goal, the metric for success, is not viewers and it's not profit? It's doing the sort of news and not doing the sort of news that the Republicans want, and just giving them the propaganda they want, not running, critical stories about the immigration effort, flooding the airwaves with conservatives so that you don't hear from leftists or even centrist Democrats. It doesn't matter if it tanks. It doesn't matter if it fails in terms of the business, if the business is not fundamentally what it's about. And that's really what it's looking like. And honestly, Sharon, what it's looked like ever since they brought on Bari Weiss, who had no qualifications or capabilities when it comes to this. It's just been right-wing DEI from the very beginning. What do you make of it?
And she's not even good at it. I mean, at least Fox News is good at it. She's not even good at it. She doesn't have the bodies yet. More people have to be replaced. I once was on vacation in Miami and I ran into, I was in an Uber. And I just started talking like I often do, probably too much. And the guy said, I used to be in quality control and I would take over Burger Kings. And I said, the customer service must have been horrendous. And he said, yeah, but what I had to learn was you got to work with what you got. I couldn't just go in and fire everyone. I had to have an influx of new people and they would then begin to turn the tide. People would kind of leave on their own if they didn't feel welcome there because there'd be a new standard. She doesn't even know how to do that correctly. I mean, look at Tony DeCoppel on the evening news and what has happened. I guess his story about little Marco being a great champion and what a great guy was about their biggest success. Everything else has flopped miserably. Yeah. But it does remind me of a plot. Did you ever watch that morning show, The Morning Show on Apple TV with Jennifer Aniston and Reese? This is the same plot. They brought in all of these people. It was horrible. Mary Jane on BET, same thing. I'm just telling you, if you want to binge watch something, this has been done before. And it didn't work out on either of those shows either. It didn't work out.
Yeah. I don't remember. I'm not a huge fan of morning show. I've watched like 4 seasons, 5 seasons of it. I'm just not. I like all the people involved. I just don't like the show. But anyway, yeah, no, you're totally right. In terms of like working with what you got, my wife put on Bar Rescue yesterday, which I'm not a huge fan of that either. I think they're really mean to the workers. And as a former food service person, I think they're too mean. But like you come in and you make it cleaner or like new machines. You don't turn it into a wood shop. Like it's still got to be a bar at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think you make a good point there. CBS News editor-in-chief Bari Weiss keeps failing in her mission to turn CBS into pro-Trump propaganda, but she's still refusing to back down or even learn a lesson amidst all this. Take a look at the most recent example. So there's this guy, Dr. Peter Attia, a wellness guru that was hired by Bari Weiss, as well as other sort of right-leaning or right-appealing contributors just last month to come on to CBS News. And like every other decision that she's made, it immediately blew up in her face. How? Well, it turns out that he has some interesting friendships in his past, notably Jeffrey Epstein, because he appeared in the Epstein files. And look, a lot of people are in the files. I technically am in the files, but he's in the files a little bit more than me. I appear one time. He appears 1,700 times in the Epstein files, which is not a good look. But it's a notably worse look when you start to dig into what his appearances are. I'm in the Epstein files because I hosted an episode of The Young Turks. He's in the Epstein files because in an email from 2015, he told Epstein that, quote, "The worst part about being your friend is that the life you lead is so outrageous, and yet I can't tell a soul." Yeah, Peter, why can't you tell a soul? Why couldn't you tell a soul about your friendship with him? Is it because 7 years earlier he had been locked up for sex trafficking minors? I think that's a top 10 reason why you couldn't tell a soul. Then in 2016, because they emailed for more than a year, he made a lewd crack about cunnilingus, writing, "The P word is indeed low carb. Still awaiting results on gluten though." And that's ruined both that and gluten for me, I think, for the rest of my life, actually. That's gross, man. That's Jeffrey Epstein. You know he was sex trafficking minors, right? And then there's this. He says this, I can't talk now, but we should find 60 to 90 to rigorously go through the entire set of labs. He's talking about Epstein's health. Bit by bit is not helpful. Have you decided if you're interested in living longer, solely for the ladies, of course? So he's a wellness guy, and he's on the down low talking with Jeffrey Epstein about how he can help him to live longer for the ladies who he traffics. And this is what Peter Attia was saying. Now, there's also this actually, I almost don't even want to talk about this because this makes me even more uncomfortable. There was this thing where he hung out with Epstein as his baby son was fighting for life. There was a thing where he had cardiac arrest, and rather than go and be with his wife, who was at the hospital for multiple days as his baby son is clinging to life, he instead just continued working, including emailing the next morning after he found out about that to potentially meet with Jeffrey Epstein. As a father of a young child, I don't even want to talk about this. It makes me just feel so uncomfortable. But anyway, there's a lot of bad stuff. Now, one would think this should be sort of open and shut. It's not like he has a lot of tenure on CBS News. Why would you keep this guy on? And look, in his defense, he put up this statement saying he was not involved in any criminal activity, which is true. My interactions had nothing to do with his sexual abuse or exploitation of anyone. But that's kind of the problem, though. You were ignoring all of that because you thought it was cool that he was talking to you. And you were talking about sex with the sex predator. And so as of right now, everybody expected when this came out, Yaz, that he would be canned like instantly. Like, this is such a bad look for CBS News. Why keep this guy on, especially when he's a new hire? But notably, Bari Weiss has not fired him. She's so far resisted all the pressure to fire him. And that seems a little bit suspicious. Why are you clinging to the Epstein friends so much? Now, notably, Weiss's wife, Nellie Bowles, also appeared to correspond with Epstein via email. So maybe she doesn't want to set a precedent where that's taken super seriously or whatever. But this is just the latest in a lot of missteps by her. I'll remind you, her town hall with Erica Kirk, which she was so sure everybody was desperate for, saw an 11% decline in viewership compared to what they normally run in that slot. And Tony DeCoppel or whatever, the new CBS News guy, he's lost massive ratings. It's been one failure after another. And yet she is doubling, tripling down. Yes, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I never expected him to be fired over this because, yeah, Bari Weiss thinks that she knows better than everyone else, even though, as you pointed out, her intuition has proven repeatedly to be wrong over and over and over again, right? Even Tony DeCoppel, nobody knows his name, but even him, his ratings have tanked. He had a really weird initiation where he was trying to get people to say his name properly, and it's like this is just, and he was like, "Oh, I'm the new Walter Cronkite." Like you can't say that about yourself. You're supposed to let other people say that about you. And no, it's not gonna be you just because you're in that slot now, especially considering that CBS is very different from what it was back during the days of Walter Cronkite to today. And especially the reason for that, a big part of the reason for that is because of Bari Weiss herself. And then this guy, Peter Attia, I've seen him around on like wellness spaces on YouTube and things like that. I don't really watch a lot of his stuff, but there's a lot of grifters in the health space, right? As I'm sure everyone knows now. I kind of have been aware of it for a long time because I would, like you want to see what's good for you and whatever is out there, but it's very easy to get into grifter space the minute, like if you're looking up a yoga workout or something like that, next thing you know, they're talking to you about like anti-vax content and things like that, So it happens very, very quickly, and a lot of people are not ready for that. But he is part of that world very much so. And then for somebody to go from that world to be involved with somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, who is involved with everybody else in the world, anyone of influence, that must have been very flattering for him. And he wants to go over Jeffrey Epstein's blood work because he has, all this privileged time to go over all that with him, and Jeffrey Epstein wants to do that. And also the story about his infant baby, the baby was in San Diego and the wife, and he was in New York, and he didn't go back to San Diego until like a week after the baby had been in the hospital, which is, it's horrible. And he wrote about that in his book actually. And he said, I regret having not done that, blah, blah, blah. But he didn't say it's because I was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein in New York and that's why I didn't go, so.
Yeah. Oh, that's no way to fill your time.
Yeah, he left that part out.
By the way, you referenced Tony DeCoppel saying like he's like the new Walter Cronkite or whatever. It reminds me, way back, there was a new Weekend Update guy on SNL, and he introduced himself saying he's kind of, I think what he said is, I'm kind of a cross between Chevy Chase and Bill Murray, which is just setting like this massive expectation for yourself that few could reach, and he did not. So don't do that. That's a bad idea. New boss at CBS, Bari Weiss, has been having a very rough time, and I've been having a very fun time cataloging it along the way. She has lost yet another big star as she tries to refresh and renew CBS to produce news that isn't nearly as interesting to the viewer, but is approved by the White House. Anderson Cooper is now leaving 60 Minutes. He's apparently been there for nearly 20 years. They offered him a contract renewal, and he has apparently said no. Now, some people are saying, wait, isn't he at CNN? Yes, he is normally at CNN, but he also does this job on 60 Minutes, which I've never like been a viewer of 60 Minutes, but it is still very big in media. To lose him is a big loss. And so what's interesting is that the fact that he did the show, but also had his main role on CNN, provided a big way to promote 60 Minutes because he could actually use footage from it and discuss it and show it and drive people over to that. Whoever they end up getting to do it right now, and they might have a difficult time getting anybody high profile considering the reputation of CBS right now, is almost certainly not gonna have that built-in advertising. And so not good necessarily for the show going forward. Now, he has put out a statement about supposedly his motivation for this. He said, being a correspondent at 60 Minutes has been one of the highlights of my career. I got to tell amazing stories and work with some of the best producers, editors, and camera crews in the business. For nearly 20 years, I've been able to balance my jobs at CNN and CBS, but I have little kids now. I don't want to spend as much time with them as possible while they want to spend time with me. So, is that actually what is going on? Because yes, he does have little kids, and I have a little kid. And so I understand wanting to spend more time with them. That makes sense. But that said, like, when people say that they're leaving, a big role to spend time with their family, that always feels a little bit convenient, considering what else is going on right now. Like, he has the kids, yes, but Bari Weiss has made an utter laughingstock of CBS News. And 60 Minutes, by the way, has not been immune from that effect. They've looked fairly compromised as a result of what Weiss has done. And so I don't know, some other people are questioning it too. Longtime media columnist at Status News, Brian Lowry, said, have worked around Hollywood long enough to know nobody ever really leaves a job to spend more time with their family, which is not proof positive again. You want to spend time with your kids because eventually they grow up and they start routinely insulting you, and you pine for those days. But yeah, I don't know, Sharon, what do you make of this?
I think if someone threw less money at Anderson Cooper and said, oh, we'll revive your talk show for half of what 60 Minutes was paying you, he'd do it tonight, okay? He'd rush into production and bring you his streaming talk show, okay? Yes, he has young kids. I love children. You love children. We all want to not miss 1 second of their growing up. But the timing, you can't ignore it, okay? He quit because 60 Minutes doesn't exist anymore. Not in the way we knew it as the longest running news show. Oh, the ratings. It doesn't exist. It's gone forever. Like Johnny Carson told David Letterman when he was lusting after the Tonight Show. It's gone, Dave. It's gone. Joan Rivers has been in for me. I'm hardly on anymore. I get it. You want it over Jay. It's gone. And so Anderson Cooper said, why am I doing this? I've got to protect my brand. He's not going to be with his children New Year's Eve. He's going to be drunk with Andy Cohen on the air, like he always is. And I'm fine with that. But let's just, it just bothers me, and I get it. Journalism is a business, John. And maybe this is why I don't have these, not that this isn't a huge opportunity, but I hate it when journalists lie, okay, and become part of this corporate thing. Just have diarrhea of the mouth, tell it all, okay? Yeah. I love my children, and by the way, 60 Minutes is a joke, so I have to take a step back.
Yeah, and what's so ridiculous to me, setting aside the Anderson Cooper, it's just the latest issue for CBS. The cover story for Weiss being put in charge is CBS doesn't understand the modern media landscape. They don't get it. They're too lib or whatever, so they need to bring in, an iconoclast. And then she's gonna work things out. But everything is worse since then. So if your cover story was true, and this was for business purposes, you wanna make more money, well, you're not. Okay, this isn't working. So obviously you would fire her at some point. If and I think a lot of people's belief of what's actually going on is that this has nothing to do with business, and they literally don't care if CBS lives or dies. This is just to stop CBS from criticizing Trump. Then yeah, you'd keep her on because they are doing a little bit less of that. Sure, they're failing, they might die, but they're not bothering the administration as much on the way to their grave. And so they really are just proving all of us right with every passing day. That right there is Brendan Carr. He's like the chief censor for the Trump administration, and the entire thing where they attempted to get late night show hosts, in this particular case, Stephen Colbert, to no longer feature Democratic politicians, it's blowing up in their face. But they're putting a strong face forward, implying that they think they've got like great messaging on this, and somehow this is actually gonna help them out rather than the Democrats. And in the case of Texas, it really does seem like it is helping the Democrats. But that said, let's see Brendan Carr, see if he can weave his way through this in a way that helps the administration. Let's jump into this first bit.
And Brendan Carr, the man of the moment. Mr. Chairman, set the record straight. What happened? You're censoring people over there now? You're afraid? You're on the verge of going after CBS?
This was Democrat on Democrat violence. CBS was very clear that Colbert could run the interview that he wanted with that political candidate. They just said you may have to comply with equal time, which would have meant potentially giving airtime to Jasmine Crockett and another candidate. But instead of doing that, they claimed that they were victims. This was all about a political candidate trying to get attention and clicks, and the news media ran with it like lemmings. They just ate it up.
Yeah, you know, the media just eating up things that are said to them. Not like Laura Ingraham is going to immediately do in response to that exact comment, because it's what she wants to hear. That's why she teed him up in that bitchy little way. Like, oh, are you censoring people over there? Yeah. No, you've been conscious for this, Laura Ingraham, right? You know that Stephen Colbert's losing his show because of what Brendan Carr is doing. They're literally investigating The View over this. She wants to pretend that it's just Colbert and pretend that he hasn't already shown the statement that was given to him that did not say anything like what Brendan Carr is implying. And we'll remind everyone of that just in case. He wants to imply, or she wants to pretend that, we know almost anything, so I can spin this. No, this has gotten way out in front of both Brendan Carr and Laura Ingraham. So to try to imply that Brendan Carr's only goal in all this is making sure that all the Democrats get interviews is obviously on its face absolute bull crap, and we're not going to accept that. First of all, it's not about getting the other Democrat on. They would definitely be trying to twist the arm of Stephen Colbert to have Ken Paxton and Cornyn and whatever, all the others on too. The idea that it would only be one side is absolutely ridiculous. And anyway, he's also, by the way, himself going to undercut the entire argument, which you'll see as we continue.
Media ran with it like lemmings. They just ate it up.
Would you have gone after them for violating the equal time rule, as Colbert said?
What we've said is we've been very clear is that broadcasters have a unique right and privilege, a license. And one thing they have to do is comply with the equal time rules. But complying with equal time would have meant
When has that been enforced? When's the last time that's been enforced against I used to work for CBS many years ago.
It's been a while.
So Laura Ingraham there, like she's not like presenting it as the devastating point it should be, but her point is actually good. What are you talking about? When has that been enforced? And she could have been even stronger, saying, wait, when has that been enforced for a late night show like Stephen Colbert's? And the answer is never. That's never actually been a requirement, which is devastating to the fact that they're doing it right now, conveniently in an election in Texas that they are worried about losing. But also, let's not skip over the fact that he's like, they implied that we would have done it. And you ate it up like lemmings. So would you have done it? Yeah, no, we would have done it. Well, then what game are we playing here? So Stephen Colbert was right. CBS News, I guess, even in this final analysis, I guess was right that theoretically it would have triggered that. Now, I side with Stephen Colbert that CBS News should have used their massive resources and public standing, what little might be remaining of it, to actually stand up to the bullies. Then you could do that. You could sue the FCC, you could bring it to the Supreme Court, and you would likely win. The thing is that CBS News doesn't want to win on this. They want the Trump administration to win on this. And by the way, you might say, well, then just let him do it, let it trigger the FCC thing, and then Stephen Colbert will get in trouble. Isn't that what CBS would want? No, their immediate goal is to stop the interview from happening. They don't want Democratic candidates to get the high profile. They don't want people to pay attention to what's going on in the Democratic primary in Texas. That is the overarching goal of the leadership of CBS News, which is Bari Weiss, which is the Trump administration. And right there, and it's not enough to have Fox News carrying water for the administration, helping Brendan Carr tell his lies. That's not enough. That and OAN and Newsmax and all the daily blanks and all that, they have to have CBS as well. And by the way, soon they have to have CNN as well. And Laura Ingraham pretends that she doesn't understand any of this contextual stuff going on, where we are effectively experiencing the hungerization of our media in real time, but she's getting paid well, so I guess why would she even pay attention to it? In any event, he wants to imply that it's Democrats freaking out. We're being even-handed. This is just a new policy that we'll pretend isn't new, but we would do it to everyone, except that he really does seem to have a problem with Stephen Colbert, because he goes on to say, but look, I get it. It's tough to be Colbert. He's had what he probably views as a long and distinguished career in the limelight. He sees that that limelight is fading, is coming to an end. That's got to be a difficult time for him, I get it. But that doesn't change the facts of what happened here. And that is such a fantasy land idea of what he pretends to believe is going on. Colbert thinks he's had a long and distinguished career. No, Stephen Colbert has had a long and distinguished career. If this phase of it is coming to an end, it's not, as you would imply, he's losing his show. No, The government put pressure on a media outlet to fire a popular host, and they pathetically complied. And so Stephen Colbert will no longer have a show. That does not reflect poorly on Stephen Colbert. He's literally the only person it doesn't reflect poorly on. It damn sure reflects poorly on Brendan Carr, the FCC, especially CBS. I would say in a general sense, our entire goddamn country. It reflects poorly on all of us. Stephen Colbert is the only person who is doing the right thing in this case. And by the way, Brendan Carr and Trump, I'm sure, would love to tell themselves reassuring bedtime stories that as soon as they get Stephen Colbert off of CBS, that'll be it. We won't have to worry about this inconvenient guy anymore. Get the hell out of here. I don't know what the next phase is going to be. I don't know if it's a podcast or if it's going to be on YouTube or if he'll more likely be picked up by an HBO or a Comedy Central or one of the other networks. But he is still a very popular host, arguably with a higher profile thanks to the attempt by the Trump administration to censor him. So I have a feeling he's going to be sticking around for at least a little bit. And that said, we have a lot more to talk about, but I do want to welcome to the show our guest. Tehran has overcome his power issues and now is bringing his power to the show. Tehran Van Gazri, how's it going?
Thank you so much for having me. I know that when it rains in LA, it pours, and it definitely started pouring in LA, and that has caused a lot of confusion. Power outages. Cars are spinning around and exploding on their own. It's just rain in LA do not go together.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. It got weird over the last couple of days. I would really like for it to end, but thankfully you are here. And so
I am here.
You've been seeing what's been going on with Stephen Colbert. The FCC wants to have their censorship and eat it too, but I feel like this has really blown up in their face, and it's been very counterproductive. If their goal was to stop Tallarico from getting a higher profile, that doesn't seem to have worked. What do you make of what you've been seeing?
Well, we've seen this before where the government tries to censor something and then inadvertently actually makes it much bigger. And the perfect case is hip hop. It's when they decided to slap on that parental advisory, it actually made more kids go and more people go. Yeah. And now hip hop is the biggest music genre in the entire world. Now, I loved it in the case of hip hop. I hate it in this case because of what it actually means. It's a slippery slope. We saw it happen before with Jimmy Kimmel, and now we're watching it and the ramifications of it now. It's one thing if the broadcast network company decides to do corporate decisions and tell their employees not to do something or say something. It's another thing when it's government and the government's acting like thugs. That's the beginning of censorship. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then we're getting censored for sure. And that's what's happening here. Now, what we do have is we have Tallarico coming in and his profile is blown up. This is the Texas Democratic star of the nation because of this. And Stephen Colbert, by being transparent and being honest, has shown the remedies of comedy. And as a comedian, I will say that I'm more proud of Stephen Colbert now than I have ever been of any president in this last 2 years of regime.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It is seeming like Donald Trump and his regime wants to weigh in on the Texas Senate primary, not the Republican side. He's too terrified to actually endorse someone, but on the Democratic side. Specifically, he seems to be a little bit more worried about James Tallarico being the nominee than Jasmine Crockett. And the reason I'm saying that, I don't know for sure, is that the FCC has been cracking down on anyone with a big platform that tries to bring Tallarico on for an interview that might be seen by a lot of people and might enhance his numbers. Specifically, I'm talking about Stephen Colbert, who announced on his show yesterday, and you can go watch the clip, that CBS lawyers informed him that because the FCC is considering maybe making it so that late night shows are no longer exempt from the equal time requirement, whereby if you bring on a candidate, you have to bring all the candidates on. That has always been the case, that you could just bring on candidates that you want to be on a talk show or whatever. But the FCC wants to get involved in that. CBS is like, it's not even the law now. It's not even the regulation, but we're going to stop you from having James Tallarico on. And nobody's surprised by this because CBS has been taken over by the Trump administration. They have Bari Weiss, their editor-in-chief or whatever, who's just doing whatever Trump wants. And evidently the marching orders are Tallarico can't be seen by anyone. We don't want his message getting out. And what I love is that Stephen Colbert, he's doing his intro to his show, and he introduces Jennifer Garner's gonna be on the show, and he says, you know who's not one of my guests tonight? That's Texas State Representative James Tallarico. He's supposed to be here, but we were told in no uncertain terms by our network's lawyers who called us directly that we could not have him on the broadcast. Then I was told in some uncertain terms that not only could I not have him on, I couldn't even mention not having him on. And because my network clearly does not want us to talk about this, let's talk about this. And he, in the end, ended up talking about Tallarico for quite a while. And I love that the attempt to control people's access to information about him has not only produced this monologue, which a lot of people are talking about, but also they did end up interviewing Tallarico and they put it on the YouTube channel, which when I checked this morning had 1.5 million views. Almost certainly more people will end up seeing the interview because of all the attention that this is bringing it to. And I just love that reaction. Now, the interview's up. You can and should go and watch that. It's available on YouTube. You can watch it freely. But yeah, since this is in your state and Tallarico might be your candidate potentially, what do you make about this?
Well, I have Eminem stuck in my head right now. The FCC won't let me be, but they have tried in the past to take somebody like Tallarico down because I think in a lot of ways, in a very real way, he represents something that is very scary to the Republican Party. He's a Christian, and I think Colbert even mentioned this in his speech that he gave or his segment that he did about how he couldn't have Tallarico on his show. He did mention that the right has tried to co-opt religion as if they're the only ones. I'm sorry, he said this in the actual interview with Tallarico. He said the right tries to co-opt religion. They try to say that you can't be a Christian unless you're a Republican. Donald Trump actually did say that. And Tallarico is a practicing Christian. He's involved in the church and he has been for a long time, and he is an active Democrat. And one of the things that he has done for people of this state, or tried to do, is fight for the right of religious freedom, something that Christians in this state have tried to overrun, as we talked about in the last segment. And if he wins this primary, it'll be very hard to see him go because we need that kind of fight here in Texas. But I hope that he would be able to bring that fight to the Senate and implement some changes here in this state. But also a lot of the criticism that gets lobbed against somebody like Tallarico is like, he's still not very far left or whatever, he's still Christian, and a lot of people who vote Democrat might seem concerned about that, right? But I have to reiterate, because I've said this before, you really need to put it into context, right? In Texas, in the state of Texas, this is not New York, this is not California, it's not Massachusetts or Washington State. In the state of Texas, this is a candidate who can really resonate with a lot of people. I know Christian Republicans in this state who really love James Tallarico.
Oh, really?
Yeah, more than they like Ken Paxton, that's for sure. And so I'm not just like talking about theory, like these are people, people listen to him, people hear him because again, he has that strong Christian identity. And I think for a lot of people who have been living in this Trump bubble and trying to, be a good person while also supporting this Christian candidate, they now have another Christian candidate that actually does sound like a good person to them. Because a lot of MAGA Republicans that I know here have actually admitted that Trump is not, like a really nice person. He is very difficult for them to defend. They still do it because they don't think they have another choice, but James Tallarico does represent that choice. And then there was a big scandal where he allegedly said that he didn't want to run against a strong Black woman because he wanted to run against a mediocre Black man. There was that. I defended him. First of all, he says he didn't say that. But Colin Allred did run a very mediocre campaign. Everything about that campaign was mediocre. I would say calling it mediocre is generous. He ran a bad campaign, right? But he dropped out of the race, and now we have Jasmine Crockett. I haven't seen her campaigning as much as I've seen James Tallarico, so that's interesting. And I would have said before, I might have actually said this, one of the big boons of her entering the race was that she was expected to bring in a lot of fundraising dollars and just be a better candidate overall as far as having more national recognition. But we haven't really seen that. So Tallarico has really pulled forward, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to see. The polls seem fairly split. It's interesting because I would have assumed that Stephen Colbert would have like politically liked Jasmine Crockett quite a bit, but maybe the religion thing, sways him a little bit, or maybe it's just a principled thing that if he's told not to interview someone, he wants to be able to. So, but either way, I like that he's putting the focus on this race. After Trump's State of the Union, of course, he's gonna have some right wingers that are gonna kiss his ass, no matter what he said. Their response was already written. Best speech ever. And one of the new ones on the scene is Tony DeCoppel, who claimed that he was gonna be like the next Walter Cronkite. Instead, he's been dished up by pro-regime CBS as something to make Trump like them. And he delivered. Take a look.
It was an extraordinary speech, the longest to a joint session in history, the longest State of the Union in history. In some ways, vintage Trump, combative, populist, historic for other reasons as well. The first part of the speech, all about the economy, an issue we know a lot of Americans want to hear about. He touts it, but he does so against the wall of negative opinion that we see in our polls. And then really all the energy of the speech, the heart of the speech on culture issues through the middle.
Yeah, and so it's extraordinary. And you know what that made me feel like? It would be like if I gave the draft of my novel to someone. I was like, hey, could you read this? Can you give me your thoughts? And they're like, yeah, it was the longest book I've ever read. It was so long. Great job. It was very long. Is that the high praise you think it is? I think even he is actually apparently pretty MAGA. He was struggling there to give the dude some credit. He said he touted the economy. Was he honest about the economy, Tony DeCoppel? That was hardly Walter Cronkite of you. No fact checking, by the way. He did acknowledge that it's against a wall of negative opinion, but what do you think about what he said, Tony? Did he show empathy? Did he accurately reflect people's concerns about the economy, about what's going on in Minneapolis? I mean, people are being gunned down. Did he address that? Did he talk about the Epstein files? Nope, it's vintage Trump. It's well, maybe a little bit combative or whatever, but like, no, you're not gonna get anything like honesty on CBS anymore. And so I know you have a little bit more experience in that field. What would you make of this, Sharon?
I am sickened by Tony DeCoppel. You have to remember, he didn't just start, he's pretty young, I guess, but he didn't just start when Trump emerged as this, disease we can't seem to rid ourselves of. He was trained as a real journalist. And I mean, I make a lot of jokes, but I actually care about journalism. And does he not realize that Trump's not going to be here forever?
Yeah.
I mean, he's literally an actor and not even a good actor. And by the way, the one throwaway line about, despite negative, whatever, he made it seem like the people who were rightly complaining and exercising their speech are negative. He made it seem like the rest of us are negative. And Trump is one hell of a cheerleader. How despicable is this guy? It means that much. He's making millions of dollars. He's on the evening news, which there's only a handful of people in the history, men, mostly men, of America and the world that ascend to that chair, which really shouldn't even exist anymore. It's antiquated. But is it really worth it to you to just be liar in chief of the network? This is sick stuff. Save your money, go buy property out in the Hamptons by Matt Lauer, but we don't really need to hear much from you. What a sick guy.
I think you might be underestimating how nice his house is. It's possible it's a very nice house that he's bought off of these lies. Yeah, can you imagine Walter Cronkite listening to Trump's, "We're winning too much, I don't wanna win, we've never won before, I can't take it," and be like, yeah, that was extraordinary. What an amazing thing. Some people are being negative Nancy's about the economy. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is like freaking out like a toddler over there lying about it. And Tony DeCoppel has to say extraordinary. He has to say that stuff or else he will be canned. He has been put there to deliver a message that Donald Trump will like. That is his job. You might have some sort of attachment to journalism or ethics. That is not what is keeping him employed at this point. And so those are the sorts of lies you're gonna get. Now, why don't we go to Fox News? They have been, I think, a little bit on some of the shows, they've been willing to acknowledge the bad polling and everything. That said, it's the night of the State of the Union. They gotta keep it together for their MAGA base. So if we could jump to graphic 7. Laura Ingraham said it's possibly his best speech ever. Yeah, Laura definitely actually thinks that. She probably thought it was a great speech. Here's the pathetic thing. Every speech he gives from here on out has to be his best speech. They can never ever acknowledge that one is worse than a previous one. But the thing about it is, if you actually follow that logic for a number of years, and each one is better than the one before, it's kind of insulting of the ones that came a couple of years ago. Apparently they weren't that great because he's exceeded it year over year. Aren't you being a little bit insulting of Donald Trump, Laura Ingraham, without thinking about it? But anyway, yeah, this is what the media is. Like, if people have lost faith in the media, it's a combination of two things. One is right-wing propaganda, taking fake news and turning it into a thing where you just apply that to reporting that you don't like. So that's definitely a part of it, the propaganda and everything. And then there's these people, these empty vessels, these pathetic, corrupt, poor, unfortunate souls that are filling these seats and never once expressing an opinion they actually hold while raking in millions of dollars. And people see that and they lose respect. Even some of the people, like Laura Ingraham has an audience, they watch it. Do you think that they actually generate respect for her after years of seeing it? Yeah, they don't want her to attack Donald Trump, but they also know she's not being authentic. This is, I think, what is leading to the crisis in confidence in our media. But Sharon, what do you think?
We'll never get it back. That's why it's so sad. It's so disheartening. And maybe we shouldn't. Maybe things evolve and you have to turn to places like this, independent media, truth tellers, who they also try to take out and hit with indictments. But it's just, what do you want out of this life? I'm not mad at people who choose acting. It's an honorable profession, I guess, right? So just go do that. Why are you doing what you like to say places like North Korea and Russia did? Why are you so heavily involved in this? It's a real sickness. It needs to be studied. They need to be studied. It's very disheartening. We will never get it back. We'll have to shift, pivot to something else, but we'll never get back any semblance of confidence, this push-pull that the media is supposed to have with, truth telling. It's just sick.
I agree. I have no problem if people actually want to be actors. And the funny thing is, a lot of these like supposed right-wing independent people, they desperately wanted to be in the entertainment industry and they couldn't make it happen. So instead they play this role. And what it makes me think of is, as a person who occasionally, not necessarily today, likes professional wrestling, what people who don't watch professional wrestling often say is, don't you know it's fake? When not a single wrestling fan thinks that it's real. It's a misconception for people on the outside. But at the same time, there are so many conservatives that think that Fox is real, that these people actually think this. And by the way, you can enjoy it. Yeah, I like what Tucker Carlson pretends to believe or whatever. Or yeah, no, I like that Laura Ingraham pretended to think that it was a good speech. Like, you can enjoy it. Like, I enjoy the WWE, but I don't enjoy it because it's real. I enjoy it because it's entertaining. Be honest with yourself. Be as honest as a 12-year-old watching WrestleMania can be. I don't think that's too high of a bar to set for 55-year-old conservatives.